There is a person in your life who makes your life impossible. The boss who, no matter what you do, is never satisfied. The family member who knows exactly what to say to drive you out of your mind in 30 seconds. The co-worker who seems to exist only to irritate you. The person who, every time they appear in your life, produces in you exactly the reaction you didn't want to have. That person. Do you have them in mind? Now, I want you to listen to what comes next without defenses, because what I'm about to tell you goes against everything the resentment and accumulated frustration have made you believe about that person. You should thank them. I'm not joking. I'm not being naive about what it's cost you to deal with them. I'm not minimizing the real impact they have on your life. I'm saying something more precise. Without that person, you would never know if the work you've done in the 10 previous episodes of this series has produced anything real. Without them, your calm would be theoretical, beautiful in reflection, in reading, in the moments where nobody pushes you, but without verifiable value when what really tests you arrives. That person is exactly what tests you. And if the work produced what it promises, that test produces something different now from what it produced before. Welcome to episode 11 of Master Your Mind. This is Stoicism for Winners. In the previous episode, you received the training program. The 3 practices: the morning preparation, training with the small during the day, the evening examination, 15 minutes of conscious work that build the calm the 10 previous episodes described. Today, that training faces its most real test. Not traffic, not the difficult email, not the minor annoyance you use as a practice repetition. Difficult people, the boss who disrespects you, the family member who always touches what hurts, the colleague who drains the atmosphere, the person from your past with whom you have to interact anyway, and who every time they appear reactivates exactly the patterns the work of this series has been trying to deactivate. Those people are the test of the training. And the reframe this episode proposes, if you receive it completely, can permanently change the relationship you have with them. Not because they change, because what you see when you look at them changes. Instead of seeing the obstacle that ruins your peace, you see the gym where your peace grows stronger. Instead of seeing the enemy to avoid or endure, you see the involuntary teacher who shows you exactly where the work is still necessary. Instead of cursing their presence, you can arrive at something that seems impossible from where you are now. Gratitude, not for what they've done to you, for what they've taught you about yourself. There are 3 voices accompanying you today. The same 3 from this entire series. Marcus Aurelius left written in his Meditations the most direct and most powerful passage that exists on how a Stoic relates to difficult people. We'll examine it in detail in the second lesson. Epictetus taught that the person who irritates you is your teacher, that they show you exactly where your inner peace is still fragile, and that this information, uncomfortable as it is to receive, is exactly what the work needs to advance. And Seneca wrote something that for 2,000 years has been counterintuitive and liberating at the same time. That we should thank our enemies, not as resignation, as the understanding that without the resistance they produce, the growth we seek would not be possible. All 3 arrived at the same understanding about difficult people. They are not the problem, they are the test. The phrase that accompanies you today is this: thanks to the difficult one, because without them, I wouldn't know if I've really grown. Let's begin. But before we begin, I want you to do something. Think about the most difficult person in your life right now. Not in the abstract, the specific person, the one who, when they appear in your mind, produces something in you that you didn't choose to produce. Do you have them? Now, ask yourself this question. What has this person taught me about myself? Not what they've done, what they've taught me. If something moves when you ask yourself that question, if there's something you recognize in what you just heard, stop this podcast right now, go to the comments, and write this: thanks to the difficult one, because without them I wouldn't know if I've really grown. Write it. Don't think it. Write it. Because writing that about the person who costs you the most is exactly the first step of the reframe this episode proposes. Thanks to the difficult one, because without them I wouldn't know if I've really grown. Go, write it. And when you come back, we continue. First, Stoic lesson. Difficult people are not obstacles on your path of growth. They are the path itself. Because without them, you would never know if you've really advanced. There's an illusion about personal growth that most people have, and that makes growth much slower than it could be. The illusion that growth happens in moments of reflection, of deliberate practice, of philosophical study, or spiritual exercise, and that difficult people are the ones who interrupt that growth. The obstacles that appear on the path when you were progressing well. If only that person weren't there, the work would be easier. If only circumstances were more favorable, the progress would be more visible. If only the environment cooperated, the calm you're building could consolidate. That illusion inverts reality. Real growth doesn't happen in moments of quiet reflection. It happens in moments of real friction. Quiet reflection prepares. Real friction tests. And what is tested, what withstands the test, is what was genuinely built. Epictetus taught it with an image that has been exactly correct for 20 centuries. Imagine an athlete who trains for months, does the exercises, follows the program, improves their times in training, becomes someone significantly more competent than who they were before starting, and then the day of the competition arrives. And the competition is the only moment where what was built in training is verified as real, not in the training itself, in the competition. Difficult people are the competition, not the interruption of training, the moment where what the training built is verified. And without that moment of verification, the training produces something that can feel like progress, but hasn't been tested. That can seem like calm, but is calm in the absence of what would test it. That can look like advancement, but is advancement without the friction that reveals whether the advancement is genuine or just the absence of sufficient pressure. The difficult person in your life, the one who costs you the most, is exactly the most complete moment of verification available. When you're in front of that person and you maintain the center that without them you'd only maintained under easier conditions, something occurs that no amount of practice without friction can produce. Verification. The direct and personal evidence that the work produced something real. And that evidence, unlike any reflection on progress, admits no doubt. Either you maintained center or you didn't. Either the work produced something verifiable or it didn't. There's no gray zone in the real test. And that's why the difficult person, exactly to the degree they are difficult, is exactly to that degree the most valuable teacher available. Marcus Aurelius understood it from the position that gave him the broadest possible perspective for this type of understanding, governing the Roman Empire in the years. He governed. It was not governing in easy times. It was governing with difficult people around him constantly, advisors with agendas, senators with opposing interests, generals whose loyalty was conditional. People who disappointed him, who betrayed him, who used his trust as a tool for their own objectives. And Marcus Aurelius, instead of seeing those people as obstacles interrupting his ability to govern well, understood something different, that they were exactly the material with which character is built, not despite their difficulty, thanks to it. This is your assignment for this first lesson. Think about the most difficult person in your current life, and instead of asking yourself how to avoid them, or how to change them, or how to survive their presence, ask yourself this question: without this person, what wouldn't I know about myself that I now know because they're here? Not what they've done to you, what they've revealed about you. That question, answered with honesty, completely changes the function that person has in your life. From obstacle to teacher, from problem to test, from something you curse to something that, seen with the correct perspective, you can be grateful for. Not for what they did to you, for what they taught you. Do it today. Second Stoic lesson. Marcus Aurelius began each day reminding himself he would encounter ungrateful, arrogant, envious, and selfish people, not to embitter himself, but to not lose his calm when they appeared. This is one of the most well-known passages from all of Marcus Aurelius's meditations, and also one of the most misinterpreted. When people read it for the first time, they frequently produce a reaction that goes in the wrong direction. If Marcus Aurelius began each day reminding himself he would encounter ungrateful and arrogant people, wasn't he creating a somber and pessimistic mood before the day had even started? No, he was doing exactly the opposite. To understand it completely, you need to understand what surprise produces in the moment of the encounter with the difficult person. Surprise is what destroys the space between stimulus and response. When something difficult arrives without your having anticipated it, the reaction arrives before there's been time to choose. The nervous system responds to the stimulus automatically, and what responds is the most established pattern available, which in most people, without training, is the reaction. Anticipation eliminates surprise, and by eliminating surprise, it expands the space where choice is possible. When Marcus Aurelius told himself each morning that today he would encounter ungrateful, arrogant, envious, and selfish people, he wasn't programming his emotional state for bitterness. He was programming his mind so that when those people appeared, there would be a prepared context to receive them. I anticipated it. This is exactly what I had anticipated. And from that context, the response has a completely different starting point from what it would have had without the anticipation. Not the surprise that closes the space, the recognition that expands it. Picture this scene. Marcus Aurelius has done his morning preparation. He has reminded himself he will encounter ungrateful, arrogant, envious, and selfish people. He has decided from the morning's calm how he wants to respond to each type. And at 3 p.m, an advisor enters his office and does exactly what Marcus Aurelius had anticipated some advisor would do that day. He acts from his own interest, distorts information to favor his position, is ungrateful with the trust Marcus Aurelius has given him. How does Marcus Aurelius receive him? Not with the surprise that would have closed the space and produced the reaction the advisor was perhaps seeking, with the recognition of something he had already processed in the morning. This is what I anticipated. This is exactly the type of situation for which I decided how I wanted to respond. And from that recognition, the response comes from the calm of someone who was prepared. not from the reaction of someone taken by surprise. But there's something more in Marcus Aurelius's passage that goes beyond preparation for surprise. The complete passage doesn't only say those people will be ungrateful and arrogant. It also says they are that way because they cannot distinguish good from evil, that they act from ignorance, and that we share human nature with them. Those two additional understandings completely change the experience of encountering the difficult person. You're not only prepared for them to arrive, you understand why they arrived. And that understanding, that the person acts from their own limitation and not from any malice specifically directed at destroying you, produces something that surprise and ignorance of that context can never produce: the calm of someone who sees clearly. This is your assignment for this second lesson. This morning, or tomorrow morning, incorporate this into your morning preparation. Add the specific anticipation of the most difficult person in your current life. Today I will probably encounter this person. When they arrive, I want to respond like this, not from surprise, from the understanding that they act from their own limitation, and from the decision of who I want to be in that encounter. That anticipation, done in the morning's calm, completely changes the instant of decision when the person appears. It doesn't eliminate it, it prepares it. And that preparation is exactly the difference between whoever reacts and whoever responds. Do it tomorrow morning, before checking the phone, with the specific name of the person in mind, with the specific decision of who you want to be when they appear. That's the second lesson in practice. There's something about the first two lessons together that makes visible the most fundamental principle of this episode. Both say the same thing from two different angles. The first says, difficult people are the path, not the obstacle to the path. Without them, there would be no verification of the work. The second says, anticipating that they will arrive eliminates the surprise that destroys the space of choice. And understanding why they act that way produces the calm that ignorance of that context cannot produce. Together, they say something neither can say completely on its own. That the difficult person, seen with the correct reframe and received with the correct preparation, doesn't just stop being the problem that interrupts your peace. They become the material with which your peace is built, not despite their difficulty, exactly thanks to it. That changes the relationship you have with that person in a way that, if the reframe installs completely, is permanent, because you're no longer enduring them, you're using them, not in a manipulative way, not with cynicism, with the wisdom of the athlete who knows the uncomfortable weight is exactly what produces the muscle they seek. The difficult person is the weight, and each encounter with them is a practice. Repetition. That's exactly what Epictetus taught in his school. That difficult circumstances, including difficult people, are not the interruption of the philosophical work. They are the philosophical work, where the work is verified, strengthened, and produces results that quiet reflection alone can never produce. Carry that into the second block with the clarity that the reframe has already begun. The difficult person in your life is not the problem. They are the gym. And the gym starts being useful the moment you see it that way. Before continuing with the second block, there's something about Marcus Aurelius's morning preparation that deserves to be fully developed, because it touches something practice without this development can misinterpret. Marcus Aurelius's preparation wasn't just anticipating he would encounter difficult people, it was also deciding from the morning's calm who he wanted to be in those encounters. That second part is as important as the first, because anticipation without the decision only produces the expectation of the difficult encounter without any orientation on how to handle it. Anticipation with the decision produces something completely different. When you anticipate that someone specific will probably act in a certain difficult way, and you decide from calm how you want to respond if that happens, you arrive at the encounter with a plan you wouldn't have had if the anticipation hadn't occurred. Not the elaborate plan of someone trying to control every detail of the interaction. The orientation of who you want to be in that moment, regardless of what the other person does. Do I want to react from rage or respond from clarity? Do I want to descend to the level of their behavior or maintain my own level regardless of theirs? Do I want that person to determine who I am in that moment, or do I want to determine it myself? Those decisions, made in the morning's calm when the pressure of the situation isn't present yet, completely change what's available in the real moment of the encounter. Marcus Aurelius did it every day, and the result of that daily practice is exactly the equanimity his contemporaries documented in him in the most demanding situations. Not inherited equanimity, the kind built morning by morning with honest anticipation and deliberate decision. That's available to you tomorrow morning, with the specific person in mind, with the specific decision of who you want to be, before checking the phone. Always before the phone. Before closing the first block. There's something about the first lesson that deserves to be developed with greater concreteness, because it touches something the abstract reframe cannot produce completely. The difference between knowing that difficult people are the path and experiencing that understanding in the real moment of the path encounter. That difference between intellectual understanding and embodied understanding that changes the experience in real time is exactly what separates whoever uses the reframe from whoever only knows it. And that difference is built with the same practice all the work of this series has described, with repetition, with the honest record of the Epictetus. Evening examination, with the specific anticipation of the morning preparation, and with Marcus Aurelius's active question that fills the space between stimulus and response. When the difficult person arrives without your having anticipated their appearance, the intellectual understanding of the reframe can arrive late, after the reaction has already occurred. When you've anticipated them in the morning preparation, when you've decided from calm that they are your gym and that the encounter is a practice repetition, the understanding arrives sooner, with more space available for choice to be possible. That's the connection between this episode's first lesson and the previous episode's program. The reframe of the difficult person as Jim is not an idea you have, it's a practice you do. With the specific morning anticipation, with Marcus Aurelius's question in the moment of the encounter, with the evening examination that records how the practice repetition went. That cycle, applied specifically to the most difficult person in your life, produces over time something the abstract reframe cannot produce. The direct experience that the encounter with that person is different now from what it was before the work. Not because the person changed, because what you bring to the encounter changed. And that difference, verifiable in your own direct experience, is exactly the proof that the reframe installed, not as knowledge, as a way of being. That's what episode 11 proposes. not the intellectual reframe that remains at the level of ideas, the embodied reframe that changes the real experience of the real encounter with the real most difficult person of your real life, available with practice, which starts tomorrow morning, with the specific anticipation, with the specific name, with the specific virtue you're going to practice in the next encounter. That's the beginning of the embodied reframe. And that beginning is completely available to you tomorrow morning. Before checking the phone, always before the phone, there's more about the second lesson, Marcus Aurelius's morning anticipation, that connects with something none of the previous episodes articulated in this specific way. Marcus Aurelius's morning anticipation had a dimension his text reveals with an honesty that makes it even more powerful. He didn't only anticipate he would encounter ungrateful and arrogant people. He reminded himself that he shared nature with them, that the same humanity that produced their limitations was the humanity he also shared. That dimension of the passage, frequently lost in partial quotes, is exactly what makes Marcus Aurelius's anticipation not a form of cynical pessimism about others. It's a form of recognition of shared humanity. The recognition that the ungrateful person and the arrogant person are not fundamentally different beings from the rest. They are human beings acting from their limitations. As we all act from our limitations at different moments and in different ways, that recognition, the shared humanity Marcus Aurelius included in his morning anticipation, is exactly what produces the equanimity that is not indifference, the calm that sees precisely what's occurring, including the limitation of whoever acts from ingratitude or arrogance, and that responds from that complete vision instead of from the partial vision that irritation without context produces. That's what Marcus Aurelius's morning anticipation built each morning, not the preparation for enduring others, the understanding that makes it possible to respond to others from the most complete vision available to you tomorrow morning, with the specific person with shared humanity included in the anticipation, and with the decision of who you want to be in that encounter. That's the second lesson in its most complete version. Before closing the first block, there's something more the first lesson requires to be completely useful in practice. The understanding that the reframe of the difficult person as path has important limits this episode cannot leave unnamed. The reframe is not an invitation to tolerate abuse. It's not an instruction to remain in situations where the damage is real and sustained, and where remaining produces deterioration instead of growth. It's not the denial that some relationships must be ended or significantly reduced. And it's not blaming whoever receives the difficult behavior for not being sufficiently stoic to convert it into growth. The reframe has a specific scope. Situations where the difficult person produces discomfort, friction, emotional activation, irritation, but where the damage is not of a nature that justifies walking away completely. The boss who is demanding but not abusive. The family member who is complicated but with whom the relationship is worth maintaining. The colleague who irritates but with whom work requires interaction. In those situations, the reframe produces exactly what this episode describes: the gym, the weight, the teacher, the gratitude. But in situations where the difficult person's behavior crosses the line of real sustained damage, where remaining produces verifiable deterioration in physical or mental or emotional health, where established boundaries are not consistently respected and the relationship cannot be sustained within healthy limits, the most Stoic response may be exactly to walk away. Not because the Stoics proposed escaping difficulty, but because they understood that governing oneself includes governing with whom and under what conditions one chooses to interact. Marcus Aurelius could choose many of the people in his environment. Epictetus, in slavery, could not. But even Epictetus, once free, chose where to live and with whom to interact. The freedom to choose one's environment, when available, is exactly the type of governance of the external world the Stoics considered legitimate and wise, not as evasion of difficulty, as the recognition that some situations produce damage that doesn't compensate for the growth produces. That's the limit of the reframe. And it's important to name it, because without that limit, the reframe can be used in ways that produce exactly the opposite of what this episode proposes, not growth through difficulty. Remaining in damage under the name of Stoic practice. That is not Stoicism. It's the misinterpretation of Stoicism. The correct reframe distinguishes between difficulty that produces growth and damage that produces deterioration, and responds to each in the most intelligent way available. To difficulty with the gym, with the weight, with Marcus Aurelius's question and the virtue it invites you to practice. To sustained damage with the boundary, with walking away when walking away is available, and with the search for an environment where the difficulty is the type that produces growth instead of deterioration. That distinction, named with clarity, makes this episode's reframe more powerful, not weaker, because it makes it applicable with the intelligence it requires instead of as a rigid rule that ignores the complexity of real experience. Carry it into the second block with that clarity. The gym is for difficulty that produces growth, not for sustained damage that produces deterioration. That distinction is the foundation of the complete reframe. There's more. The first two lessons need to say together about the specific topic of anticipation. Marcus Aurelius's morning anticipation has an additional dimension that makes it work with more effectiveness than generic anticipation. He didn't only anticipate the type of person he might encounter, he anticipated his own ideal response to that type of person. That second part, the anticipation of one's own response, is what converts the morning preparation from an exercise of recognizing the challenge into a rehearsal of the response. Elite athletes use performance visualization consistently before the most important competitions. They don't only visualize the challenge, the pressure, the opponent, the conditions. They visualize their own response to the challenge, the technique executed correctly, the decision made with precision, the performance at the level the training allows. That visualization of one's own response, practiced regularly, makes the ideal response more available in the real moment of the challenge because it was already rehearsed. Not just known, rehearsed. Marcus Aurelius did something functionally identical each morning. He didn't only recognize he would encounter ungrateful and arrogant people. He rehearsed how he wanted to respond, from what place, from what understanding, with what quality of attention, with what type of boundaries if they were necessary, and from what tone if they were necessary. That rehearsal, repeated morning after morning, makes the rehearsed response more natural than the automatic reaction in the moment of the real encounter, not instantly. With the time and consistency any skill requires to become more automatic than the pattern it replaces. That's what the specific morning preparation for difficult people produces, the rehearsal of the most effective response available, repeated every day, with the specific person in mind, with the specific virtue. The encounter with that person invites you to practice, available tomorrow morning, before the phone, with the name, with the virtue, with the rehearsal of the response. That's the second lesson in its most complete and most effective version, ready to be practiced tomorrow. Before closing the first block, there's something about these first two lessons worth saying with the honesty the work requires. The reframe, this episode proposes, is not easy to install, not because it's philosophically complex. It's quite simple when described. It's difficult because it goes against something that resentment and accumulated frustration make completely natural. The victim narrative. When someone treats us badly, repeatedly, when the difficult behavior arrives with the consistency some people in our lives produce, the narrative that most naturally emerges is not the gym or the involuntary teacher. It's the harmed one. The one who doesn't deserve this. The one who would have a better life if that person didn't exist or acted differently. That narrative is understandable. It has basis. And it's not completely incorrect. But it's a narrative that consumes energy without producing anything useful. The resentment it produces doesn't change the other's behavior, doesn't change the circumstances, doesn't produce growth in whoever feels it. It only consumes. The gym reframe doesn't eliminate the legitimacy of the complaint. It converts it into something useful, not because the complaint is illegitimate, but because the energy resentment consumes can be redirected towards something that does produce. The work, the practice, the growth that person's difficulty makes possible if used correctly. That redirection from resentment's energy toward the energy of work is exactly what the reframe produces when it installs completely. It's not easy. It requires the same consistency as any other aspect of this series program, but it produces verifiable results in the direct experience of the next encounter with the most difficult person, which is completely different when it arrives from preparation and the reframe than when it arrives without them. That difference, small at first and more significant with consistent practice, is exactly the evidence that the work functions. Available in the next encounter, which arrives when it arrives, for which you can already be prepared. Tomorrow morning, before the phone. Third, Stoic lesson. Epictetus taught that the person who irritates you is your teacher because they show you exactly where your inner peace is still fragile and needs to be strengthened. This lesson contains something that can be uncomfortable if received completely. The person who irritates you doesn't tell you anything about them you didn't already know. They tell you something about yourself you perhaps hadn't seen with that clarity. Exactly where your inner peace is still fragile. Exactly where the work is still necessary. Exactly what type of situation or behavior has the power to pull you from the center you've been building. That information, which the difficult person reveals with a precision no abstract examination can produce, is exactly what Epictetus called the teaching of the involuntary teacher. Picture this scene in his school in Nicopolis. A student enters with visible irritation. Someone in the market treated him with discourtesy. The student is furious with that person. with their lack of manners, with their unacceptable behavior. Epictetus listens to him and then asks him the question the students at his school learned to expect in those moments. And what did you learn about yourself? Not what's wrong with whoever was discourteous, not how to respond to them, not how to justify the irritation. What did you learn about yourself? The answer to that question, made with honesty, is always the same in essence, though the details vary. I learned that a certain type of behavior has the power to pull me from center. I learned that when someone treats me a certain way, the space between stimulus and response closes faster than I want. I learned that there's a point where my inner peace is still fragile. That information, though uncomfortable to receive, is exactly the most precise map available of the work that's still necessary, not the map someone else created about what your growth should look like, the map your own direct experience produced in the encounter with whoever irritated you. And that map, used correctly, makes the work of the following period more precise than any work created in the absence of that information. What type of behavior pulls me from center most frequently? What type of person has the greatest power to activate the automatic reaction in me? What does that say about what work is still necessary? Those questions, asked with the honesty of Epictetus's student who knows that irritation is information, produce exactly the map of future work. The difficult person was the cartographer. You decide whether to use the map. This is your assignment for this third lesson. The next time someone irritates you, before responding to what that person did, ask yourself this question: what is this irritation teaching me about myself? Not what's wrong with that person, what it teaches me about where my peace is still fragile. That question, asked in the moment of irritation, completely changes the experience of that moment. From the reaction to the other's unacceptable behavior, to information about one's own pending work. That's the teaching of the involuntary teacher, available in the next irritation, which could arrive today. Fourth Stoic lesson: your patience isn't trained with pleasant people, just as your muscles aren't strengthened, lifting feathers. You need real resistance to grow for real. This lesson is the one that most directly articulates the episode's central metaphor: the gym. Nobody who wants to develop physical strength goes to the gym and chooses the lightest weights available. The light weight doesn't produce the necessary stimulus for the muscle to respond with adaptation and growth. It produces movement without challenge. And movement without challenge doesn't build muscle. The weight that's hard, the one that makes the muscle reach its limit and that limit expand, that's the one that produces growth. Patience works exactly the same way. If you only practice patience with people who do everything you want them to do, who behave in ways you find easy to handle, who don't activate any of the triggers the work of this series has identified, you're not training patience. You're in the absence of the situation. Patience needs to be trained. The pleasant person is the feather. The difficult person is the weight. And real patience, the kind that's available when it matters most, is built exactly in training with the weights. Seneca articulated it in his letters to Lucilius with the directness that characterizes his best writing. He wrote that it's easy to be patient when nobody tests us, that true patience isn't known until the situation arrives that genuinely requires it, and that when that situation arrives, what's available is exactly what was built in previous encounters with difficulty, not wished-for patience. Practiced patience. And the practiced kind is only built with real resistance, not with the feather, with the weight. Imagine this scenario that probably feels recognizable. There's a person in your life who, whenever they appear, produces exactly the same sequence. The stimulus arrives. The impulse to react arrives almost simultaneously. And the internal battle between the reaction the impulse wants to produce and the response the work of this series proposes as an alternative. That battle, that internal tension the difficult person produces, is exactly the equivalent of the muscular tension the weight generates in the muscle. It's the stimulus that produces adaptation. Each time you're in that battle and maintain center, even with visible effort, the next time the battle is a bit less intense, because the muscle adapted, because the weight that previously took you to the limit is now a bit below the updated limit. And the updated limit is exactly the growth, not the ideal state, where there's no longer any battle. The limit that moves with each training repetition. Marcus Aurelius lived it this way. His meditations document the work with specific people in his environment who produced in him exactly that battle, who cost him, who tested the work he did each night in the journal. And that documentation, that honest record of the internal battle with the difficult people of his life, is exactly what makes his meditations the most honest text on real growth the Stoic tradition has produced. Not the account of the philosopher who no longer battles, the record of the man who battles and who uses that battle as the material of growth. This is your assignment for this fourth lesson. Identify the most difficult person in your current life and specifically determine what muscle is being worked in each encounter with them. Is it patience, humility, the ability to not need to be right, the ability to not descend to the level of whoever provokes, the ability to maintain center when someone aims specifically at where it hurts? Name it, the specific muscle that specific person is developing in you, because the weight you name has much more value as training than the weight you only endure without understanding what it's for. Do it today, with honesty, with the understanding that the answer to that question completely changes that person's function in your life. Fifth Stoic lesson. Seneca wrote that we should thank our enemies because they keep us alert and force us to be better versions of ourselves. This is the most counterintuitive lesson of the 10, and also the most liberating when fully internalized. Thanking the difficult one, the enemy, the one who makes our life impossible. How can that gratitude be genuine and not a form of denial or passive resignation before what we can't change? Seneca explained it with a precision that has been exactly correct for 20 centuries. It's not gratitude for what that person did to us. It's gratitude for what they forced us to develop. There's a fundamental difference between the two. Gratitude for what they did to us would require that what they did was good, and in many cases it wasn't. It was harmful. It was unjust. It was the behavior of someone acting from their own limitation or their own pain in ways that don't deserve gratitude. Gratitude for what they forced us to develop doesn't require that what they did was good. It only requires seeing what their difficult behavior, as an unintended consequence, produced in whoever received it. The person who treated you with repeated injustice and who in response to that injustice forced you to develop the ability to maintain dignity without needing external validation. The person who criticized you systematically and who in response to that criticism forced you to develop the ability to evaluate criticism with more objectivity than you'd have had if it hadn't arrived so frequently. The person who tested your patience in ways that seemed specifically designed to exhaust it, and who, in response to that test, forced you to develop reserves of patience that without that pressure you would never have needed to build. None of those people intended to do you a favor, but the result of their difficult behavior, seen retrospectively with the honesty time allows, includes capabilities you wouldn't have without that experience. That's what Seneca calls the reason for gratitude. Not the behavior they produced in you, the capabilities they forced you to build. There's something more, Seneca said about enemies, that makes the gratitude even more precise. He wrote that enemies keep us alert in a way friends cannot. Friends see us with benevolence. They tend to minimize our weaknesses, to emphasize our strengths, to give us the benefit of the doubt in ways that don't always correspond to reality. The enemy sees us with the attention competition produces, and that attention, though it comes from an adversarial place, frequently identifies real weaknesses friends had overlooked or chosen not to point out. The difficult person in your life, exactly to the degree they are difficult, is alert to your weaknesses in a way the people who love you easily are not. That information, though it arrives from a source that doesn't wish you well, can be more useful than the absence of that information, if you have the calm to receive it without the source completely determining how you process it. This is your assignment for this fifth lesson. Think about the most difficult person from your past, someone with whom the interaction has already ended or been significantly reduced, and with the distance time allows, ask yourself this question: what capability do I have now that I wouldn't have developed without that person? Not what they did to me, what they forced me to build. The answer to that question, found with honesty, is exactly the foundation of the gratitude Seneca described. Not the easy gratitude of whoever denies what occurred, the honest gratitude of whoever sees the complete result of a difficult experience, including what that experience produced that wouldn't have been possible without it. Do it today, with the honest distance of someone who can see the past with more clarity than the present. There's something about lessons 3, 4, and 5 together that reveals the complete structure of the reframe this episode proposes. All 3 look at the difficult person from 3 different perspectives. The third looks at them as information. The irritation they produce is the map of pending work, the involuntary teacher who points out exactly where peace is still fragile. The fourth looks at them as equipment, the weight that develops the muscle the feather can't develop, the necessary stimulus for growth to be real instead of theoretical. The fifth looks at them as an opportunity for gratitude, not for what they did, for what they forced to be built, the unintended result of their difficult behavior. All 3 perspectives together produce something none can produce separately: the complete reframe, the difficult person not as an enemy to be eliminated or passively tolerated, as the most valuable element of the available growth process, the teacher, the equipment, and the unexpected source of capabilities that, without that pressure, would never have been built. That complete reframe doesn't eliminate the discomfort of the encounter with the difficult person, but it completely changes what that discomfort means. It's no longer the price of the bad luck of having that person in your life. It's the price of real growth. And that price, seen with that clarity, becomes completely different from something to tolerate. It becomes something you can pay more deliberately, more consciously, with the understanding of what's being built with each payment. carry that into the third block with the clear image of the gym, the difficult person as the weight, the encounter with them as the practice repetition, and the muscle that's built with each repetition as the verifiable result of the work, not the work you do in quiet reflection, the work verified in the real encounter with whoever costs you the most. That's exactly what the third block will develop, with more detail about specific types of difficult people and about the specific virtue each one develops. But before getting there, there's something the three lessons of this block need to say together. That the reframe doesn't require the difficult person to change in order to work. It doesn't depend on the person understanding what they're teaching you, doesn't depend on their behavior improving, doesn't depend on anything external. It depends only on the perspective with which you receive them, and that perspective is completely under your control, regardless of what that person does. Exactly like the freedom of judgment Epictetus described from slavery. The perspective that determines the experience doesn't depend on external circumstances to exist. It depends on you, and that's why it's always available. In the next encounter with the person who costs you the most, with the reframe from this block's three lessons, the teacher, the weight, and the foundation of gratitude available to you now. There's more about the fourth lesson, patience and weights, that deserves development because it touches something practice without this development can underestimate. The gym metaphor has an implication that goes beyond physical resistance. In the gym, the athlete doesn't just lift the weight, they observe how they lift it. They evaluate the technique, identify which muscles are being worked, adjust the position to maximize the benefit and minimize the risk of injury. Intelligent training isn't simply enduring the weight, it's using the weight deliberately and with observation. Training with the difficult person works exactly the same way. It's not simply surviving the encounter with the difficult person, it's using that encounter deliberately and with observation deliberately. With Marcus Aurelius's question active, what virtue can I practice now? With observation, with the evening examination that records how the repetition went, what worked, what didn't work, what makes the next repetition more effective. That deliberate and observed use of the encounter with the difficult person is what converts the weight from something that simply weighs into something that builds. The difference between whoever suffers with the weight and whoever grows with the weight isn't in the weight, it's in how it's used. And how it's used is determined by exactly the practices the 10 previous episodes of this series have described. The morning preparation that establishes the intention before the encounter, the active question that fills the space between stimulus and response during the encounter, and the evening examination that evaluates the training after the encounter. Those three practices, applied specifically to the encounter with the difficult person, convert the weight into training instead of suffering. And that training, accumulated with the consistency the previous episode described, builds exactly the muscle of patience the pleasant person can't build, because the pleasant person isn't the weight, the difficult person is. And the weight, used with the correct technique consistently, produces the muscle, without exception. Do it this way with the difficult person in your life, with the program's technique, with the consistency of daily practice, and observe what builds in you from what previously only cost you. There's something about the fifth lesson, Seneca's gratitude, that deserves a more concrete example, because without it, the gratitude can seem like an unreachable philosophical posture in real practice. Think about someone from your past who at that time was the most difficult person in your life. Not now, then. Someone whose behavior in that period of your life cost you significantly, who produced in you reactions you didn't choose, who occupied mental and emotional space you would have preferred had a different destination. Now, with the distance time allows, ask yourself this question. What do you have now that you didn't have before that person? It could be something as concrete as the ability to set boundaries you didn't have before because you'd never needed to set them with such firmness. It could be the clarity about what you want and what you don't want in a certain type of relationship, which before that experience was much more diffuse. It could be the ability to detect certain types of behavior before they install themselves in ways that are then harder to manage. It could be simply the direct evidence that you can handle something difficult, that you survived, that you even grew within it. Those capabilities, which you now have, and which before that difficult person you didn't have to the same degree, are exactly what Seneca called the reason for gratitude. Not gratitude for the behavior, for the result the behavior produced in you. And that result, seen with the honesty time allows, includes real capabilities that without that experience wouldn't be available in the same way. That's Seneca's gratitude, concrete, verifiable. Not a philosophical posture, an honest observation of what difficulty produces in whoever traverses it with enough consciousness to learn from it instead of only surviving it. Do it today, with the person from the past, with the honesty the distance of time allows, and then, with that clear image of what that person forced you to build, apply the same perspective to the difficult person in your present. What are they forcing you to build now? That question, answered with honesty, is the beginning of real gratitude. Not the easy kind, the kind that comes from seeing completely. There's something about lessons 3 and 4 together that deserves additional development because it produces something neither can produce separately. The third says irritation reveals the pending work. The fourth says the difficult person is the weight that builds the muscle. Together they say something about the specific nature of training. With difficult people, that makes all the difference in how it's used. The weight doesn't build just any muscle. It builds the muscles used to lift it. In the same way, the difficult person doesn't develop just any capability. They specifically develop the capabilities their type of difficulty tests. The constant critic doesn't develop your patience with the arrogant. They develop your ability to evaluate criticism without the source determining whether it contains something valid. Your ability to maintain clarity about your own worth without needing external approval. Your skill in distinguishing between criticism that has a real basis and criticism that comes from the critic's limitations. The chronic negative doesn't develop your firmness before the arrogant. They develop your ability to maintain your internal state, independent of the environment state. Your skill in not catching the pessimism without confronting it unnecessarily. Your ability to consciously choose what to absorb and what to let pass. Each type of difficult person is a specific weight that develops a specific muscle, and the precision with which you identify the muscle being worked determines the training's effectiveness. The athlete who knows exactly what muscle is being worked with each exercise can adjust the technique to maximize that specific work. The one who simply lifts weights without that awareness gets results, yes, but less precise and less efficient. Marcus Aurelius's question, "What virtue can I practice with this type of person?" is exactly that technique adjustment, the precise identification of the muscle this specific weight can develop. And with that identification, the possibility of using the encounter with the difficult person in the most effective way available. Not simply surviving it, not simply practicing calm in the abstract, practicing the specific virtue that type of person specifically invites, with the same precision as the athlete who knows exactly what muscle they're working and adjusts each repetition to maximize that work. That's training with difficult people in its most effective version. Not general resistance before difficulty, the specific work with the specific virtue, the specific difficulty of that person invites, available in the next encounter, with the precise identification with the propt named virtue. With Marcus Aurelius's active question available in the space between stimulus and response. Do it that way next time, with the precision of the athlete who knows exactly what they're training, and with the expectation not of perfection, but of verifiable progress in exactly that specific capability, which is exactly what correct training produces, always, without exception, with the consistency the previous episode described, every day, with each repetition, with each difficult encounter, with each weight, before closing the second block. There's something about the third lesson in particular that connects with the entire arc of the series in a way that makes visible something the previous episodes prepared but didn't articulate directly. The third lesson says, irritation reveals the pending work. And in the context of the complete series, that means something specific. The anger the third episode worked on comes from the judgment that something is unjust. The irritation the difficult person produces most frequently is exactly that type. Behavior we perceive as unjust or inappropriate. The fear the fourth episode worked on comes from the judgment that something is dangerous or overwhelming. The irritation before the person who seems threatening or who activates insecurity has exactly that root. The anxiety the fifth episode worked on comes from judgments about the future. The difficult person who produces anxiety is the one who activates judgments about what could happen, what could go wrong, how things could worsen. And the pain of provocation the eighth episode worked on comes from the judgment about the insult. The person who deliberately aims where it hurts produces the wound exactly to the degree that judgment converts their words into a wound. Each emotion the difficult person produces has its root in the judgment, the ninth episode described. And the irritation that reveals the pending work is exactly the information about which judgments are still automatic, which judgments still haven't been examined with enough depth for their automatism to be reduced. That connects this episode's third lesson directly with the work of previous episodes. The difficult person isn't just the gym for patience. They're the most precise detector of the automatic judgments that still operate without having been examined. And that function, as detector of judgments, makes the encounter with the difficult person even more valuable still. Not just the practice of calm, the most precise information about which judgments are still automatic and require the work of the ninth episode. That's the involuntary teacher in their most complete function. Not just the one who develops the muscle, the one who shows with precision which muscle needs more work. With that complete understanding, the reframe from this block's 3 lessons is even more powerful. the teacher, the weight, and the instrument for detecting automatic judgments. 3 functions of the same difficult person available in the next encounter. With the attention this episode proposes, there's something about the 5th lesson, Seneca's gratitude, that the episode can't leave without an important clarification. The gratitude Seneca describes doesn't require you to express it to the difficult person. It's not an instruction to tell whoever made your life difficult that you're grateful. That would be, in most cases, a response the situation doesn't require, and that in many cases would produce worse results. Seneca's gratitude is internal. It's the reconfiguration of the relationship you have with the experience of that person in your life within your own mind. Not the declaration to the other, your own recognition of what that difficulty produced that wasn't there before. That distinction matters because without it, the exercise can seem like a demand for generosity towards someone who doesn't deserve it. It isn't. It's the recovery of meaning from what occurred so that the energy resentment consumes can be used more productively. Seneca practiced it this way in his own circumstances. When he reflected on the people who had made his life difficult, including Nero, who eventually condemned him to death, the gratitude wasn't expressed to the other. It was the internal understanding of what those difficulties had forced him to develop. The clarity about what truly matters, that proximity to death, produces with a precision no favorable circumstance can match. The honesty about one's own priorities that adversity makes impossible to evade. The depth in philosophical work that comfortable circumstances would never have produced with the same intensity. That's Seneca's gratitude. Not gratitude expressed to whoever caused the damage. The internal understanding of the complete result of the difficult experience, including what that experience produced. That wouldn't have been possible without it. That understanding, internal and honest, is what the 3rd step of the 10th lesson proposes. The mental gratitude, silent, yours. Not about the difficult one, about what the encounter with the difficult one makes it possible to build. Do it that way. With the person in your present, with the honesty of whoever sees the complete result instead of only the cost. And from that complete vision, the energy resentment consumed can begin to be used differently in the work, in the growth, in the practice that person's difficulty makes possible, which is exactly what this episode's reframe proposes. Not the denial of the cost, the complete vision of the result, available to you with honesty. Today, 6th Stoic lesson. Every time a difficult person pushes you over the edge, they're showing you pending work, not a defect of theirs, but a weakness of yours that you can correct. This lesson requires an honesty that can be uncomfortable, because the first reaction to the idea that the difficult person is showing us our own weakness is frequently resistance. Wait, it's not my weakness. It's their unacceptable behavior. It's their way of being that doesn't correspond to how they should treat people. It's that person's problem, not mine. That resistance is understandable, and it's also partially correct. The difficult person's behavior is their responsibility. This isn't meant to minimize that, or to transfer responsibility for inadequate behavior from whoever produces it to whoever receives it. But the intensity of the reaction that behavior produces in you is information about you, not about what they did, about how much access they have to your emotional state And that access, that power to push someone over the edge, doesn't come only from the behavior of whoever acts. It also comes from the specific fragility in whoever receives it. The same behavior, exactly the same, produces completely different reactions in different people. We saw it in the episode about judgment. The same event produces radically different experiences depending on the judgment applied to it. The same difficult person activates someone and doesn't activate another. Why? Not because the difficult behavior is different, because the point of fragility that behavior targets in each person is different. The constant critic has enormous power over whoever needs external approval to feel sufficient, and has almost no power over whoever has developed enough clarity about their own worth that external criticism doesn't determine that clarity. The arrogant person has enormous power over whoever feels their position in the world, depends on the recognition others give them, and has almost no power over whoever has developed enough internal independence that the arrogant person's recognition isn't necessary. That doesn't mean the critic and the arrogant person are harmless. It means their power over you has a limit that depends on you, not only on them, and that limit can be extended with exactly the work the 6th lesson describes. Identify the weakness the difficult behavior reveals and work specifically on that weakness. Not to eliminate sensitivity to that type of behavior in a way that makes you stop being human, to reduce the access it has to your emotional state so that its power decreases progressively with the work. Seneca articulated it with a directness that leaves no room for evasion. He said that if something disturbs you, the disturbance belongs to you, that the event is outside, that the disturbance is inside, and that what's inside can be worked on in a way the external cannot be controlled. That doesn't eliminate the responsibility of whoever acts badly, but it gives you a lever over the experience the event produces in you, that no amount of control over external behavior can give you. The lever of internal work, which is always yours, regardless of what the provoker does. This is your assignment for this 6th lesson. Identify the type of behavior from others that produces the most intense reaction in you. Not the behavior itself, the type. Is it criticism? Is it contempt? Is it ingratitude? Is it arrogance? Is it passive aggressiveness? And then ask yourself this question: what does that specific type of behavior say about what point in me is still fragile? What do I need that I'm not getting when that type of behavior activates me? What work would make that type of behavior have less access to my emotional state? Those questions, answered with honesty, produce the most precise map of pending work that exists, not created from theory, from the direct evidence of lived experience with the people who've cost you the most. Use it. Do it today. 7th Stoic lesson. The Stoics understood that difficult people act from their own ignorance and suffering, and that judging them harshly is forgetting that you too have been difficult for others. This lesson introduces the most human dimension of the reframe, the understanding that difficult people are not a separate category of human beings who, for some reason, chose to be difficult when they could have not been. They are people who act from what they have available, from the patterns they learned, from the models they saw, from the pain they haven't processed, from the limitations they don't recognize in themselves, from the ignorance, as Marcus Aurelius described it, of good and evil in the most precise sense of the term. not the ignorance of someone who never had access to information about how to treat others well. The ignorance of someone who knows intellectually but hasn't integrated it into practice. Who can describe the correct behavior, but who, in the moment of difficult behavior, acts from their most automatic patterns? Which are the patterns of pain, of fear, of unresolved need, of the defense mechanism that installed itself at some point in the past when it made sense and that now operates automatically even though the original situation no longer exists. Epictetus saw it with the clarity given to someone who had been the object of that type of behavior in its most extreme form. The master who broke his leg was not a malevolent person by nature. He was a person who acted from the limitless power slavery gave him, from the models of how to use that power he had learned, each from the ignorance of what that exercise of power did to whoever received it and what it did to himself. That understanding didn't excuse the behavior, but it changed the experience of receiving it. From anger at the deliberate injustice of someone who knows what they're doing and chooses it anyway, to equanimity before the limitation of someone who acts from what they have available, even though what they have available produces damage in whoever surrounds them. And there's something more the seventh lesson adds that none of the previous ones said directly. You too have been difficult for others, not in the same way, not with the same frequency, not in the same circumstances, but there have been moments in your life where you were the difficult person for someone else, where your behavior, seen from the perspective of whoever received it, produced exactly the type of difficulty you describe in the difficult person of your life. That memory, that honesty about the moments where you too acted from your own limitations and produced difficulty in those around you, is exactly what produces the compassion the seventh lesson describes. Not the compassion that excuses, the compassion that understands, the kind that knows the difficult person, and you share something fundamental. Humanity, with all its limitations and its automatic patterns and its unprocessed pains. This is your assignment for this seventh lesson. Think about a moment in your life where you were the difficult person for someone else, not to produce guilt, to produce perspective. What was driving you at that moment to act the way you acted? What might you have needed that you weren't getting and that your difficult behavior was an imperfect way of seeking? That answer, that understanding of what drove you to be difficult in those moments, is exactly the same understanding that applies to the difficult person in your current life, with different names and different circumstances, with exactly the same mechanism. Do it today, with the honesty it requires to see yourself in the role you normally only see in others. Eighth Stoic lesson. Marcus Aurelius asked himself what virtue nature had given him to deal with each type of difficult person, and thus converted each encounter into an opportunity to practice that virtue. This lesson introduces the most practical tool of the 10, Marcus Aurelius's question. Before any difficult person, before any behavior that activates the impulse to react, the question is this: what virtue has nature given me to deal with this situation? Not how do I avoid this person, not how do I change them, not how do I endure them without it costing me too much. What virtue can I practice in this encounter? That question does something specific with the relationship you have with the difficult person. It converts it into opportunity, not to suffer, to practice. the constant critic, the person who always finds faults, who makes everything you do seem insufficient. What virtue can you practice in their presence? The clarity about your own worth without needing the approval of whoever criticizes. The ability to evaluate criticism with objectivity without the source determining whether it contains something useful. The patience with whoever can't see what you see. The chronic negative, the person for whom everything is wrong, who drains the atmosphere, who converts any possibility into impossibility. What virtue can you practice in their presence? The ability to maintain your internal state independent of the environment state. The discernment about what to absorb and what to let pass. The kind firmness that neither catches the negativism nor confronts it unnecessarily. The arrogant one who considers themselves superior, who belittles, who always needs to be right. What virtue can you practice in their presence? The humility that doesn't need to prove anything. The serenity that doesn't require the arrogant person's recognition to know what it's worth. The ability to not compete for a status the arrogant person defines and that you don't need. The passive-aggressive who attacks indirectly, who denies their intentions, who confuses and frustrates. What virtue can you practice in their presence? The clarity that names what it sees without needing confirmation from whoever denies it. The quiet firmness that establishes boundaries without entering the game of denial. The patience with the complexity of whoever can't be direct. And the difficult family member who knows all your buttons, with whom the history complicates everything and you can't simply walk away. What virtue can you practice in their presence? That's the hardest examination, and also the most valuable. The ability to maintain center with whoever knows you enough to know exactly where to aim. The compassion that sees the pain behind the difficult behavior of someone whose history you know. And the firmness that establishes real boundaries without the shared history erasing them. For each type of difficult person there's a specific virtue that encounter invites you to practice. And Marcus Aurelius's question converts each encounter into exactly that invitation. This is your assignment for this 8th lesson. Think about the 3 types of difficult people who most frequently appear in your life. For each one, ask yourself Marcus Aurelius's question. What virtue has nature given me to deal with this type of person? Name it, specifically, not in the abstract. And the next time that type of person appears, have that specific virtue as the focus of the interaction. Not enduring that person, practicing that specific virtue in their presence. That completely changes the experience of the encounter. Not because the person changes, because what you seek in the encounter changes. From surviving to practicing. Do it today, with the 3 types, with each one's specific virtue ready for the next time they appear. There's something about lessons 6, 7, and 8 together that makes visible the progression of the work this block builds. The 6th goes inward. It shows you that the intensity of the reaction the difficult person produces in you is information about you, not just about them. The map of pending work. The 7th goes toward the other. It shows you the difficult person acts from their own limitation, and that the perspective this produces, combined with honesty about your own moments of being difficult for others, produces the compassion that doesn't excuse but does understand. And the 8th gives you the tool. Marcus Aurelius's question that converts each difficult encounter into the specific opportunity to practice the specific virtue that type of person specifically invites. All three together build the complete practice of the type. Encounter with the difficult person, the inward look that identifies the pending work, the look toward the other that produces the understanding that makes compassion possible, and the tool that converts the encounter into deliberate practice. Those three dimensions, applied together in the next encounter with whoever costs you the most, produce something completely different from what the encounter without that framework produces, not the suffering of whoever endures. The practice of whoever uses. That's exactly what the third block of this episode establishes. And there's something connecting this block with the entire arc of the series worth naming explicitly. The second episode of this series described the space between stimulus and response. The difficult person is the most powerful stimulus your life produces on the most regular basis. And Marcus Aurelius's question, "What virtue can I practice in this encounter?" is exactly the content that can fill that space, not the battle between the impulse to react and the will not to. The active question that orients toward practicing virtue instead of toward fighting the impulse. That's the shift the eighth lesson produces when fully understood. Not the suppression of the reaction, the substitution of what the space contains. Instead of the empty fight between reacting and not reacting, the question that gives direction. What virtue can I practice now? That question, in the space between stimulus and response, is the most powerful tool of the 10 this episode offers, available in the next difficult encounter, with the person who activates you the most, with the specific virtue already identified, and with the clarity that this encounter is not the obstacle to the work, it is the work itself. Before closing the third block, there's something about the types of difficult people this episode describes that deserves development, because it gives the reframe a specificity the abstract version can't have. The difficult family member deserves special attention because it's the type of difficult person most frequently mentioned by men in this audience's age range. Not the unbearable boss who can be changed, not the problematic neighbor who can be avoided, the difficult family member with whom you can't simply walk away because there's a history, a shared family, perhaps children in common, perhaps a mandatory presence at certain events you can't and shouldn't avoid. That person knows all your buttons. They know them because they were there when they were installed, because they witnessed the moments where the patterns were formed that they now activate with a precision no stranger could match. And the combination of that history, that precise knowledge of the triggers, and the impossibility of walking away completely, makes the difficult family member the most complex examination of all. Marcus Aurelius's question applied to the difficult family member produces something specific. What virtue has nature given me to deal with this specific person? Not the generic virtue of patience. The specific virtue, this specific relationship with this specific history, invites you to practice. It could be the compassion that sees the pain behind the difficult behavior of someone whose history you know with enough detail to understand where it comes from. It could be the firmness that establishes real boundaries within a relationship where the shared history tends to erase them. It could be the ability to maintain center with whoever has the most precise information about how to pull you from it. It could be the separation between the person and the behavior. Loving the person even though the behavior is unacceptable. Maintaining the relationship even though it requires boundaries that didn't exist before. Those specific virtues, which the difficult family member specifically invites you to practice, are the hardest to develop precisely because the practice material, that person, has so much access to what activates you. But they're also the most valuable, because if you can maintain center with the family member who knows all your buttons and whose history complicates everything, you can maintain it with practically any person in any context. The difficult family member is the most complete examination, and the virtue built in that examination is the most robust available, not the kind that works when conditions are favorable, the kind that works when conditions are the most demanding. That's what the third block establishes as a whole. The information about pending work that irritation reveals, the compassion that understanding the other produces along with honesty about one's own moments of difficulty, and the tool of Marcus Aurelius's question that converts each type of difficult person, including the most demanding, into the opportunity to practice the specific virtue that type of person specifically invites. Carry it into the fourth block with the clarity that the reframe now has all the depth necessary to be embodied. Not just understood, embodied. In the next encounter, with the person who activates you the most, with Marcus Aurelius's question, with the specific virtue already identified, and with the understanding that this encounter is not the obstacle to growth, it is the growth itself, available now, in the next opportunity, which could arrive today. There's more about the seventh lesson, compassion, that connects with something the entire series has built, and that this episode can articulate with a precision the previous episodes didn't have. Stoic compassion is not the sentimental compassion that excuses any behavior with the justification that we all have, our history. It's something different and more precise. It's the understanding that the other's difficult behavior comes from something real in their experience, that they act from what they have available, that this doesn't excuse it, but it does explain it, and that this explanation changes the experience of receiving the behavior in a specific way. It reduces the personalization. The person who acts from their pain or their ignorance isn't choosing you as the object of that pain or ignorance in a way that says something specific about your worth or your position in the world. They're projecting from inside outward with the same mechanics, regardless of who's in front of them. That mechanics, when seen with clarity, makes the difficult behavior lose part of its power to wound you, not because it doesn't affect you, but because the personalization, the sense that this behavior is directed specifically at you because there's something in you that justifies it, is reduced. The constant critic doesn't criticize you specifically because you're more criticizable than others. They criticize because criticizing is how they process their relationship with the world. The chronic negative doesn't see everything as bad, specifically in your presence. They see everything as bad in everyone's. The arrogant person doesn't belittle you specifically because you deserve to be belittled. They belittle everyone they can from the position arrogance gives them. That de-identification, that seeing that the behavior isn't specially yours even though it arrives toward you, is exactly what the seventh lesson's understanding produces, not indifference. The perspective that reduces the unnecessary wound, the wound that comes not from the behavior itself, but from taking it so personally that it becomes information about who we are instead of information about who produces it. Epictetus articulated it this way: if someone insulted your shoe, would you feel insulted? No, because the insult to the shoe says nothing about you. The question Epictetus posed was this: why does the insult to you say more about you than the insult to the shoe? Not because the insult to you is less real than the insult to the shoe, but because whoever insults projects from within themselves, and what they project says more about them than about the object of the projection. That's the understanding the seventh lesson produces. Not insensitivity to what's directed toward you. The perspective that sees where it comes from, and that reduces the personalization that produces the unnecessary wound. That perspective, combined with the boundaries the situation may require, and with the practice of the specific virtue Marcus Aurelius proposes, completes this block's work, available in the next difficult encounter, with the complete understanding, with the compassion that doesn't excuse, with the question that converts into practice, and with the firm boundary when the behavior requires it. That's the third block in its most complete version. Use it in the next encounter, which arrives when it arrives, for which you're already prepared. Before closing the third block, there's something about the eighth lesson, Marcus Aurelius's question, that deserves additional development on how to apply it in the real moment of the encounter. Marcus Aurelius's question, what virtue has nature given me to deal with this type of person, sounds good in quiet reflection. But in the real moment of the encounter, when the difficult person produces the stimulus that activates the impulse, the question can seem too elaborate to be accessible in that instant. There's a way to make it more accessible. Formulate it in advance. Before the encounter, in the morning preparation, you already have the answer. The specific difficult person you anticipate, the specific virtue that type of person invites you to practice, and the answer already available for when the encounter occurs, so that in the real moment of the encounter, you don't need to ask the question and find the answer in real time. Just activate the answer you already prepared. Like the athlete who visualized the correct technique in training and who in competition doesn't need to create it from scratch. They activate it. That's how Marcus Aurelius's question works when correctly integrated into the previous episode's program. The morning preparation asks the question in calm. The real encounter activates the prepared response, and the evening examination evaluates whether the prepared response was available in the moment that mattered, and what adjustment makes the next day's preparation more precise. That complete cycle converts Marcus Aurelius's question from an interesting philosophical exercise into a practical tool with verifiable consequences. Not the virtue of someone who already has perfect calm, the virtue of someone who practices it deliberately in the most demanding encounter available, with the prior preparation, with the active question, with the subsequent evaluation. That's training with difficult people in its most complete and most effective version, available to you. With the program the previous episode established, applied specifically to the people who activate you the most. Who are the ones who can most develop what most needs developing? Not because the discomfort is good in itself, because it's exactly the type of resistance that builds the type of capability you seek. The muscle of calm, available when it matters most, verified in the most difficult encounter, built practice by practice, difficult person by difficult person, every day, in what you have, including whoever costs you the most, who are exactly the ones who contribute the most to the most. Training thanks to the difficult one. Ninth Stoic lesson. The most difficult person in your life is your final exam. And every time you maintain calm before them, you demonstrate that your training is working. This lesson closes the reframe from the previous 9 with something the other 9 prepared, but none said directly. The most difficult person in your life is not the person who least deserves your calm. They are the person who most verifies the calm is real. There's a difference between calm that exists in the absence of challenge and calm that exists in the calm presence of the most intense challenge available. The first is pleasant, it's comfortable. It can seem to represent advancement, but it hasn't been tested. And calm without a test is theoretical calm. The second, the one that exists in the presence of the most intense challenge, the one maintained before the person who activates you the most, with all the history between you and with all the triggers that person knows and uses. That is real calm, verified by the most difficult test available. Every time you're before the most difficult person in your life and maintain the center that without that pressure is comparatively easy to maintain, something occurs that no reflection on progress can produce in the same way. The certainty that the work produced something real, not the hope that it produced something. The certainty. Epictetus taught it with a clarity that came from someone who had faced the most extreme test possible. He said, "Philosophy isn't measured by how well you can discuss its principles in a classroom. It's measured by how you behave when the most difficult circumstance available arrives." And for most people, the most difficult circumstance available isn't a historic catastrophe, it's that person. With that behavior, in that specific context where everything you've built is being tested simultaneously, when you maintain center there, when the calm, the work built is available exactly where it's most needed, you have something no podcast episode can give you. The evidence that the work worked. And that evidence, that direct and personal demonstration that the calm is real and not theoretical, is exactly the point of no return in this series work. The point where whoever was practicing knows the practice produced something. The point where the training effort is justified not in the promise but in the verification. Marcus Aurelius understood it this way. Each time he maintained equanimity before someone who had betrayed his trust, who had deeply disappointed him, who acted from ingratitude or arrogance or dishonesty with all the power that proximity to the emperor gave them. That equanimity wasn't just the demonstration of his character before that person. It was the verification that the work of the nightly journal, of the morning preparation, of the years of Stoic practice, had produced exactly what it promised. The calm circumstances couldn't destroy because it didn't live in the circumstances. It lived in the work. This is your assignment for this 9th lesson. Think about the last encounter with the most difficult person in your life. Did you maintain center, or did the reaction arrive before choice was possible? Not to judge yourself, to evaluate the current state of the training. If you maintain center, that's the verification. The work is producing results in the most difficult test available. If the reaction arrived first, that's information. The work needs more practice in exactly that type of situation. And the next time that person appears is the next training opportunity, not the final failure, the next practice repetition. In either case, the answer is to continue the work with the consistency the previous episode described, every day, in what you have, including the most difficult person you have. 10th Stoic lesson. Today, You're going to change the way you see that person who complicates your life. You're going to start seeing them as your personal gym, and you're going to mentally thank them for each opportunity to practice. This is the lesson that converts the complete reframe into a concrete practice applicable today. The practice is simple in its description, though it requires real work in its implementation. 3 steps. The first step is to identify the most difficult person in your life right now. Not in general, the specific person, with the name, with the type of behavior that most activates you, with the history between you. Name them mentally, with honesty, without the softening that resistance to this exercise can produce. The second step is to reframe. This person is not my obstacle. They are my gym. They don't make my life impossible. They show me exactly where the work is still necessary and give me the opportunity to do it. I don't curse them because they appear. I use them because they're there. That reframe, though it may seem forced the first time you do it, with practice produces something real. It gradually changes the experience of the encounter with that person in a verifiable way, not because the person changes, because what you seek in the encounter changes, and what you seek largely determines what you find. The third step is mental gratitude, not out loud, not necessarily in a way the person knows or sees. In your own mind, thank you for being the weight I need to build the muscle I want to have. Thank you for showing me exactly where the work is still necessary. Thank you for being the test that verifies the training is working. That gratitude, though counterintuitive, produces something in the experience of the encounter that resistance and resentment cannot produce. The calm of whoever sees clearly, of whoever knows exactly what's occurring and exactly what it serves, of whoever isn't being pushed by the situation but using the situation. That calm, which mental gratitude produces gradually with consistent practice, is exactly the calm the 11 previous episodes of this series have been building, verified in the encounter with whoever tests it the most. We've reached the end of episode 11 of Master Your Mind, the episode of the test, the second to last of this series, the one that took all the work of the 10 previous episodes and applied it to the most everyday and most demanding situation that work can face, the most difficult person in your life. Let's walk through today's 10 lessons. The first showed us that difficult people are not obstacles on the path of growth. They are the path itself. Without them, the calm would be theoretical. With them, it's verified as real. The second showed us Marcus Aurelius's practice, anticipating each morning that you'll encounter ungrateful, arrogant, envious, and selfish people, not to embitter yourself, but so that when they arrive, there's a prepared context to receive them that expands the space of choice instead of closing it with surprise. The third showed us Epictetus's teaching, that the person who irritates you is your teacher. That irritation is the map of pending work, that it shows you exactly where peace is still fragile. The fourth showed us the gym metaphor. Your patience isn't trained with pleasant people, just as your muscles aren't strengthened with feathers. You need real resistance. The difficult person is the weight that produces the growth the feather can't produce. The fifth showed us Seneca's gratitude, not for what that person did to you, for what they forced you to build. The capabilities you developed in response to their difficult behavior that without that pressure wouldn't have been necessary. The sixth showed us the personal weakness the other's difficult behavior reveals, that the intensity of the reaction it produces is information about pending work, not just about the other's defect, and that this work identified with precision, can be done. The seventh showed us the difficult one as a human being who acts from their limitation, and reminded us that you too have been difficult for others. The perspective that honesty produces is exactly the foundation of compassion that understands without excusing. The eighth showed us Marcus Aurelius's question, "What virtue has nature given me to deal with this type of person?" The tool that converts each difficult encounter into the specific opportunity to practice the specific virtue that type of person invites. The ninth showed us the final exam, that the most difficult person in your life is the most powerful available test of the training, and that every time you maintain center before them, you have the certainty, not the hope, that the work produced something real. And the 10th, which closes this episode's content, gave you the practice. The 3 steps: identify, reframe as Jim, and mentally thank each opportunity to practice. That's what this episode leaves you. Not the promise that the difficult person will stop being difficult, the reframe that completely changes what that person is in your life. From problem to teacher, from obstacle to equipment, from curse to Jim. Before this episode closes, there's something I want to ask of you. The most difficult person in your life is in your mind right now. And there's something you learned about yourself thanks to that person that before that encounter you didn't know or didn't see with that clarity. Go to the comments and write what that person taught you about yourself, not what they did to you, what they taught you, because in that distinction between what they did to you and what you learned lies exactly the reframe this episode proposes. And your answer could be exactly what someone else in this community needs to read to be able to make that reframe with the difficult person in their own life. Go to the comments, write it. In the next episode, we reach the end of Master Your Mind, episode 12, the close of this series. Complete inner mastery. If the first 10 episodes built the tools and the program, and this 11th episode tested them in the most real situation available, the 12th closes the circle. The point where no one can destroy you from outside because you're invincible from within. Not because difficult people disappear, not because circumstances become easier, but because what you have inside no longer depends on any of those things to exist. That's what's coming. The final step, thanks to the difficult one, because without them, I wouldn't know if I've really grown. This is Stoicism for winners. This is Master Your Mind. There's something about the journey of the 10 lessons this close needs to say in a way that goes beyond the summary. This episode's 10 lessons are 10 perspectives on the same fundamental. Reframe. The difficult person is not the problem, they are the test. The first lesson says it from growth. Without the difficult person, growth isn't verified as real. The second says it from preparation. Anticipating their arrival expands the space of choice when they arrive. The third says it from information. The irritation they produce is the map of pending work. The fourth says it from the gym metaphor. Real resistance is the requirement of real growth. The fifth says it from gratitude, not for what they did, for what they forced to be built. The sixth says it from honesty. The intensity of the reaction they produce reveals the personal fragility that can be worked on. The seventh says it from compassion. They act from their limitation. As you have acted from yours. The eighth says it from virtue. Marcus Aurelius's question that converts each type of person into the opportunity to practice something specific. The ninth says it from certainty. Maintaining center before that person is the most complete test of the work. And the 10th says it from practice. Identify, reframe, mentally thank. 10 perspectives. 1. Reframe. That permanently changes the relationship you have with the most difficult people in your life. Not because they change, because what you see when you look at them changes. From problem to teacher, from obstacle to equipment, from curse to gym. And that shift in perspective, installed with the practice this episode proposes, produces something no amount of managing external circumstances can produce. The calm that doesn't depend on difficult people disappearing to exist, that exists in their presence, verified by their presence, strengthened by their presence, exactly as Marcus Aurelius's calm existed in the presence of everything his governance produced that was most difficult, not despite it, thanks to it. That's what this episode leaves you, and that's exactly what the final episode of this series will complete. The inner mastery no one can destroy from outside, not because circumstances are favorable, because what you have inside, no longer depends on circumstances to exist. There's something about lessons 9 and 10 together that connects the work of all 11 episodes in a way that makes visible the path traveled. The 9th lesson says, the most difficult person in your life is your final exam. The 10th says, today you change how you see them. Together, they say something that perfectly summarizes what 11 episodes have been building. Growth isn't verified in reflection. It's verified in the encounter. And the encounter with whoever activates you the most is where the work of the 11 previous episodes has its most real test. If the work was done, that test produces something different, not perfection, the verifiable difference between who you were before the work and who you are now. That difference, small or large depending on the time and consistency of the practice, is the test, not the podcast's promise. The direct experience of whoever practiced, and that direct experience, that seeing with your own eyes that something changed in the encounter with whoever costs you the most, is the most motivating thing that exists for continuing the work. Not this episode's words, the test you yourself produce in the next difficult encounter, which could be today, which could be tomorrow, for which you already have the reframe, the morning anticipation, Marcus Aurelius's question, and the evening examination that closes the cycle. That's all you need for the next difficult encounter to be different from the previous ones. Not perfect, different, and different is enough to start, thanks to the difficult one. Because without them, I wouldn't know if I've really grown, and now you know. Because the difficult one showed you exactly that the work produced something real, available in the next encounter, which arrives when it arrives, for which you're already prepared. This is Stoicism for winners. This is Master Your Mind. There's something about the 9th lesson that deserves deeper development, because it touches something that defines what it really means for the training to be working. The 9th lesson says that maintaining calm before the most difficult person demonstrates the training is working. But there's an important nuance in that statement that can be missed if read too quickly. Maintaining calm doesn't mean feeling nothing. Verified calm is not insensitivity to what the most difficult person produces. It's the presence of the space between what they produce and the response you give. The most difficult person arrives. The impulse to react arrives. The nervous system signal the encounter produces arrives. And verified calm is that in that moment, in that instant where everything arrives simultaneously, there is space. It may be small. It may require visible effort to keep open, but it's there. That space, small but real, is the evidence of training, not the absence of the impulse, the presence of the space despite the impulse. Marcus Aurelius didn't stop feeling the provocations of those around him. His meditations document that he felt them. What they also document is that there was a space between what he felt and what he did, and that in that space, with the work the journal gave him, choice was possible. That's verified calm, not the Zen state of someone who no longer feels anything, the active space of someone who feels and chooses. And that space, in the presence of the most difficult person in your life, is exactly what the work of 11 episodes built. Small at first, wider with consistent practice, more available with each difficult encounter that becomes a practice repetition instead of automatic reactivity. That's the test, not perfection, the space. And the space is there now, after 11 episodes of work, with more consistency than it was at the beginning of this series. That's the training working, verifiable. In the next encounter, with the person who activates you the most, with the space, the work, built. There's something about the 10th lesson and its 3-step practice that connects directly with the previous episode's program. Identify, reframe, mentally thank. Those 3 steps are not a practice independent of the training program. They are the specific application of the program to difficult people. The first step, identify, occurs in the morning preparation. The specific person, the behavior that activates, the virtue the encounter invites you to practice. The second step, reframe as Jim, also occurs in the morning preparation. The deliberate decision to see the next encounter with that person as a practice repetition instead of as the obstacle to survive. And the third step, mental gratitude, can occur at any moment. In the moment of the encounter, when difficulty arrives, as the recognition that this is exactly what builds what you seek to build, and in the evening examination, when you review how the repetition went and what it produced. The 3 steps of episode 11, integrated into episode 10's program, produce the most complete version of calm training available, not the abstract version. Practiced in the absence of difficulty, the one practiced specifically with the most intense difficulty available. The most difficult person in your life, with the complete program, with the consistency that makes real transformation possible. That's what 11 episodes of work built, and what the 12th episode will complete, with the final step. The inner mastery no one can destroy from outside, thanks to the difficult one. Because without them I wouldn't know if I've really grown. And now you know, this is Stoicism for winners. This is Master Your Mind. There's something about the journey of the 10 lessons this close needs to articulate in a way that makes visible the coherence of the episode as a whole. Episode 11 has a specific architecture. The first block establishes the fundamental reframe and the preparation. Difficult people are the path, and anticipating them expands the space of choice. The second block gives the depth of the reframe, irritation as information, resistance as a requirement for growth, and gratitude for the unintended result of difficulty. The third block gives the tools, the work with one's own weakness, compassion that understands without excusing, and Marcus Aurelius's question that converts each encounter into practice of a specific virtue, and the fourth block gives the verification and the practice, the most difficult person as final exam, the 3 steps, and the close that connects with the final episode. That architecture produces something the individual blocks can't produce alone. The complete understanding of the reframe, not a part of it. The whole, the difficult person seen from growth, from preparation, from the information irritation reveals, from the resistance that builds muscle, from gratitude for the unintended result, from the personal weakness it reveals, from the compassion their suffering deserves, from the virtue their presence invites you to practice, from the final exam their difficulty represents, and from the practice of the 3 steps that converts the reframe into something applicable today. 10 perspectives, 1 person, 1 reframe that can no longer be undone, not because they change, because you change how you see them. And what you see determines what you experience, and what you experience in the encounter with those people determines whether that encounter produces growth or simply suffering. The reframe produces growth. Suffering without the reframe simply produces suffering. And that difference, so simple to state and so deep in its consequences, is exactly what 11 episodes of work built. The ability to choose the reframe in the moment of the encounter with the person who costs you the most. That's inner mastery in its most everyday and most concrete manifestation. Not the abstract philosophical ideal, the real practice of whoever uses each difficult encounter as the material of the growth the previous episode promised was possible, available to you. This week, with the most difficult person in your life, with the 3 steps, with Marcus Aurelius's question, with the specific morning anticipation, and with the evening examination, that closes the cycle. Thanks to the difficult one, because without them I wouldn't know if I've really grown. And now you know better than ever, because 11 episodes of work give you the perspective you didn't have before, and the 12th episode will complete what 11 left prepared. Complete inner mastery, available to you in the final step. This is Stoicism for winners. This is Master Your Mind. There's something about the evening examination applied specifically to difficult people that this close needs to describe, because it's where the cycle completes in the most productive way. The evening examination from the previous episode proposes 3 general questions. Where did I maintain calm? Where did I lose it? What will I do differently tomorrow? Applied specifically to the encounter with the difficult person, those questions produce something more precise. At what moment in the encounter with that person did I maintain the space? When did the space close and the reaction arrive before choice was possible? What produced the closure of the space? Was it the specific behavior that aimed at the most active trigger? Was it the surprise of something I hadn't anticipated? Was it the accumulation of irritations that separately would have been manageable but together exceeded the available space? What makes tomorrow's encounter more effective as practice? What do I anticipate more specifically in the morning preparation? What virtue needs more attention in the next encounter? What adjustment in technique would make the space stay open more consistently? Those specific questions, asked with the honesty of the athlete who evaluates their training without complacency and without self-punishment, produce the most valuable information available for the next day's work. not the abstract reflection on calm, the concrete evaluation of how the specific encounter went with the specific person, and that concrete evaluation converted into the next day's specific morning preparation makes the cycle complete in the most productive way possible. That's how the complete program works applied to difficult people. The specific morning preparation for the specific person, the encounter with Marcus Aurelius's question active, and the specific evening examination about how that encounter went. 3 practices, 1 cycle. The most difficult person in your life as the most valuable training material available. That's what 11 episodes built, and what the 12th will complete, thanks to the difficult one. Because without them, I wouldn't know if I've really grown. This is Stoicism for winners. This is Master Your Mind. Now comes the part that separates those who listen from those who truly change. This community exists because you decide it exists, not with words, with actions. If something you heard today moved you inside, leave your reflection here. The one that gets the most support becomes the banner of this community, the collective voice of everyone who chose not to give up. A community that doesn't run from pain, that walks through it, with courage, with judgment, with honor. But listening isn't enough. You know it, you feel it. There's a difference between the one who consumes wisdom and the one who turns it into armor. That's why we created the Stoic Code. 2 principles forged over millennia by the most powerful minds in history. It's not just another book. It's a manual of psychological warfare against your own weaknesses. Each principle includes the deep teaching, its modern application, and an exercise you can implement today, not tomorrow, today. If you decide to get it, you're not just taking something for your growth. You become part of this mission. You help us bring Stoicism to thousands of people who are right now where you once were, who struggle, who fall, who need a word to remind them who they are. Your support keeps this podcast alive. It drives it. It expands it. Thanks to you, this doesn't stop. The link is in the description of this episode. Everything you need is right there. We'll see you in the next episode of Stoicism for Winners. Every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, without fail. Stoic sessions designed to be with you when life gets heavy, when staying calm is hard, when you need someone to remind you who you are before you forget it yourself. Follow us. The Stoic who doesn't train in calm won't find calm when the storm arrives. Until the next episode, we walk this path together, and every day there are more of us who choose not to give up. Remember this: you are the sole owner of your perception, the architect of your peace, the only one responsible for the war you choose to fight or the one you choose to end. That is Stoicism, not a philosophy, a way of being unbreakable. This is Stoicism for Winners.